Hi guys, Amy here with Amy's Wares, and in today's video I'm going to finish some cards using some critters from a previous video and some backgrounds that I had sitting around. So you can see here some Copic colored little lawn fawn critters. I do have a previous video where I spend time explaining my coloring process, and I'll link that up in the top right corner here. And this is my chocolate box full of backgrounds aplenty. I have a bit of a stockpile of backgrounds, so it's nice in this case to kind of go through and pick some that will work with my critters. This is a background that I created with a layering stencil, if you can believe it. It is a layered camouflage stencil from A Colorful Life Designs, and my mind was blown when Mary Kay came up with this. Basically, it's just different layers and you ink blend and they fit together beautifully, and you can create your own camouflage pattern paper basically. So I did add a strip of white cardstock across the front of this A2 panel, and I did use a wonky stitch die around the edge to give it that nice finished look, and also continuity because it does go over the white cardstock portion. And then I just used a little sentiment from the stamp set, the Love You Tons, and I decided it needed a little bit more to the left, so I did bust out a Distress Oxide in a coordinating color and threw a little few hearts down. And then I popped up the elephants with some foam squares just to give it some dimension, and attached it to a card base, and that's all there was to that one. So as you can see, this is kind of how my batching process works, how I'm able to make so many cards. I do have a lot of the components ready to go in advance. I have a bunch of A2 card bases folded and ready, and I have, critters already stamped and colored, cut out, ready to go. And then as you saw, my box full of background panels, I have a lot of those as well. So when the mood strikes, sometimes I'll just sit around and make a whole batch of cards. So that's what you're seeing here today. On my original video with these little critters, I showed you how to Copic color for the Lazy Crafter. Just kind of give you an idea of my process with coloring, which is quite simple. And then I asked in that video if people would rather see some lunchbox notes or if they would rather see some cards made out of these critters. So this is the answer to that request, to make some cards out of these images. So that's what I'm doing here today. This is a panel from my background that was actually from a gel press day, we'll say. I had used my Distress Oxides and played with my gel press. I'm still trying to decide how much I like that process. I do think I need to give it another go, but in any event, this blue panel would have just been whatever paper I was rubbing the Distress Oxide ink off on, and it was a little bland, so I did run it through an embossing folder, and then the reddish portion was actually a mini slimline die cut. I had used one of my mini slimline dies from Cat Scrappiness, also on another previously gel pressed, and I was using the fun geometric stencil from A Colorful Life Designs on that. So I basically cut up that little slimline panel and then, laid it down on top of the other one just to give the background some interest. And this one I'm using the cute little axolotl, also known as the Mexican walking fish, but I'm told by my daughter, who is an expert, that they are not actually fish, they are salamanders. So you learn something new every day, right? Anyway, it has a fun little pun. I did thanks a lotl, and I'm just kind of setting him up with a little piece of seaweed, kind of at an angle on that little piece of cardstock that's off to the side. So I'm gluing down the seaweed so that's kind of flush with the background, and then I will pop up the axolotl just to give some dimension. And then I also glue down the speech bubble as well, just so the only thing really standing out is the little axolotl. So I attached that card panel to an A2 size card base, and then that basically finishes this card as well. So you can see my process is really quite quick and easy. It's just a matter of figuring out what pieces, parts you want to put together. So there's not much to it. Next up are these cute little hedgies. This background I actually made. It was a pretty fun technique. It was, I believe it's called School Scribbles. It is a background stamp, a big rubber background stamp from Simon Hurley. And the way that I did this was I did the ink blending with my Distress Oxides, which I'm sure, as you know, are water reactive. Side note, these are little pieces of washi tape that I had and considered using, and as you'll see, I did not finish and did not actually use. But to create the background, I did the ink blending, and then I actually spritzed water on the background stamp and stamped that onto the ink blended background. And then you kind of lay a piece of paper towel over it, and then because that ink is water reactive, it actually creates that cool, subtle look from the stamp on the background. So that's how I created that look. And on the panel itself, I used the wonky stitch dies from My Favorite Things, and I recently also ordered that wonky stitched circle. So that's what I used so that it matches the outside edging and on the circle and on the background. And then just like the others, I'm just using the little sentiment that came with the stamp set, Ascending Hedgehogs. And I started thinking I was just going to use a little white strip, but then it didn't stand out enough against the little white circle, so just found a scrap piece of green cardstock and stamped it on there. And then I still wasn't happy with it. I felt like it needed something else to kind of tie it all together, so I got out a size 10, which was a little bit thick actually. I probably should have done like the 8, but I did the size 10 white gel pen and just kind of did like a faux white stitching around this little sentiment strip just to kind of tie it in with the white behind it. I felt that made it look a little bit better. And then since I was using that thick white gel pen and also used a pigment ink to stamp the sentiment, I didn't want to take any chances and used my heat tool to, as you can see, kind of try and chase this sentiment around my craft desk. Kind of fun. Not sure. Anyway, I made it work. I used the heat tool just to kind of dry that off and make sure I didn't smudge it all with my fingers like, you know, I do sometimes. And then I just kind of put all the pieces together and again attached it to an A2 size card base, and that's really all there is to it. So I'll use some liquid glue to put the wonky stitch circle down kind of towards the top in the center, and some adhesive tape to attach that panel to the card base. And these wonky stitch dies, this is the biggest one out of that set, and it does give you a little bit of a border, which I always like how it ties in more of the white from the card base into the design. I think it's a nice clean finish that it gives the card. So again, I use these little black foam squares. These are really easy, by the way, to pull the backer off and to pull them off of the sheet that they come on, which I appreciate. So, you know, like many of you, I switch around between all different types of adhesives, but when they cooperate like that, it's always nice, right? So I use some adhesive tape just to kind of put the sentiment flush down onto the circle, and that finishes that card. Okay, this one, I actually had the background in there like that with the rectangle cutout and everything. I thought that was a good pairing. I have all these Pink Fresh Perfect Sentiments. Take that one out. I kind of just take the pieces out to figure out what I might want to use. This is just my sentiment book. If you've watched any of my batching videos, I do have a separate one of those now for all my Copic colored critters that are ready to go, or, you know, watercolor brush pen critters, basically anything that I've stamped out and colored in either die cut or fussy cut. I have a whole treasure trove of those. ready to be batched and put on some cards. So I had my sentiments with my critters, but then I kind of outgrew that notebook, so I ended up having to make a separate one. But those are actually just baseball card protective sheets or whatever. That's what I use in that notebook to kind of hold all my goodies. So just kind of playing around and figuring out what looks good and what I want to put together for this card. I did realize that there was going to be a lot of open white space in that rectangle, and I was considering going in and stenciling it, but honestly I was just being lazy. And then I realized the sentiment would fit perfectly in that open space above where I was going to put the cookie. So that was a happy little accident there that I figured that out. So I was able to use that adorable little punny sentiment, which obviously you would want to on a graduation card, otherwise it'd be kind of random if I didn't use that sentiment. Like, here's a graduation card with a random cookie and a graduation cap. Okay, but anyway, here's the fun little pun. I just stamped it right in that opening. And that is another my favorite things die. It's, I think, Peekaboo Rectangle. I will link all of the products that I used in the video details. If you expand that below and scroll down, you'll see that. And I'll also have a blog post as well with some pictures if you want to see more close-ups and things like that. So again, I'm just going through the process of putting the pieces together, figuring out where I want them to go, what will have dimension, what won't. So I add the little grad cap to the cookie with some liquid glue just on the end and let that sit a minute. And then I decide to pop that up with some foam squares just so it's kind of standing outside of that opening. And then I just use liquid glue to glue down the grad on the card. So I did off screen end up using that little congrats die as well. I did decide to glue that on the inside of the card just so there was something in there. But now I'm glad to have one of these ready to go for, you know, a graduate in my life or a future open house or something like that. So I do like to be prepared, have whatever I need on hand. So that's the benefit of batching. You can really build up your crafty stash or have a huge bunch to donate, whatever works for you. So I'm using this art glue with the fine tip. I find that it flows really easily. I have the multi-matte medium, which, you know, I love and does a great job, but I find that I'm going to give myself an aneurysm every time I try and squeeze that thing. I can't get the glue out of it. So I was excited to get this art glue and actually have it kind of flow out easily. So here I'm showing you the finished cards. Got the little cutie purple camo. I love that stencil. I've colored it in every color, every type of camo you can imagine. I've made a panel for it. So, and the little hedgies with the Simon Hurley background stamp, and then this one with the axolotl. So fun, lots of texture on that one. I just find those little critters so interesting. And this plaid background, that was actually a stamp. I forgot to mention that, but I will link that in the details. And this was a card I made previously with the little hamster from my original coloring video. So I hope you enjoyed my video today. If you did enjoy it, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And I'll check you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.